really excited for you to meet the next three folks. Nevin, one of the founders of Reserv Protocol, and Gabo, who has this incredible story. I'll save that for the panel, but this one's going to be moderated by Kelley Weaver. And I've been following Kelley as a fan for a few years now here in Los Angeles. She built a PR agency, communications agency around blockchain and crypto, and has been a pretty influential voice in Los Angeles in the crypto community and beyond LA, and has written for a number of publications. You'll find her in Forbes and Inc. and Entrepreneur Magazine and a number of others. You'll also find her sometimes on a podcast. So Kelley, I'd like to bring you up and have you introduce Nevin and Gabo. Everyone clap.
Thank you so much, James, for having me, and thanks for all being here. I'd love to introduce Nevin Freeman, the CEO of Reserv, and Gabo Jimenez, the COO of Reserv. And Nevin, tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to co-found Reserv.
Yeah, I originally thought about cryptocurrency, thinking about it on like a much, much longer time scale than anything that Reserv is focused on today. So like if you look at the history of currency, there was a while where the Dutch guilder was like the currency of the world. And then that fell and it became the British pound. And then that eventually fell and now it's the US dollar. So right now we just feel like it's US dollars and that always has been and that always will be, but that's not actually true. If you look at history, when the dominant global power falls apart, so does the reserve currency, and then that ends up giving way to a new reserve currency. And so the idea of crypto, like the thing that I was interested in early on was, well, what if you could have a currency that, not even really thinking about like censorship resistance or any of that, just like that wasn't dependent on any government, so that it could just exist. Even if governments rise and fall, it could just exist and not be disrupted, and the economy could not be disrupted throughout history. Anyway, long story short, friends and I ended up, trying to figure out, could we create a version of Bitcoin that would do this, that would be stable and that would be a currency that could last sort of forever. And as we did that, as we started to get into it, we started to think about, well, where do we start? And we started looking at countries that have really bad currency problems, high inflation, like Gabo was just talking about, and capital controls. And we realized, shit, like, there are much more urgent problems that we could actually address with this than just this long-term vision. There's actually something we could sink our teeth into right now that'd be a really big deal. And if it works, maybe we could also solve that long-term thing over the long term. To try to like make that concept of hyperinflation and like what it is that we're trying to do a little bit more visceral. Imagine, like, think for a moment right now about your bank account with your US dollars in it, okay? Think about, behold your bank account. Ah, yes, my US dollars, my savings, they're there. I have them. I can spend them anytime. Okay, now imagine if your bank charged you a 70% fee per year of all of that money to hold your money. So if you start with $10,000, then a year later, you only have $3,000. Okay? Like, that would be completely crazy, but that's what life is like in a country that, at a point in time has 70% devaluation of the currency per year, which totally happens. In Venezuela, for some years, it's been much, much worse than that. In Argentina, it's often around, like Manu said, 70% or 50%. So this happens. It doesn't happen in that many countries out of the total number of countries at any one time, but it's always happening in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 countries around the world. This is always cropping up. And so the basic thing that we realized that you could potentially do with cryptocurrency is give people access to stable money. Like, the thing we're doing now is very simple. It's just access to US dollars, right? And you might think, well, why is cryptocurrency needed for that? And it's that, like, if you think about it, like, we have plenty of technology to make it so that anyone in the world can have an account in US dollars. It's not a technological problem, right? It'd be pretty simple. We have the internet. Like, what's the barrier? It's a sort of coordination and legal and political problem. where sometimes these governments that are in this situation, they don't want their citizens to get access to outside currencies. And in other cases, sort of the global financial system doesn't want to serve people in these countries because they're considered high risk. And so, so we decided, okay, we're going to focus on these places that need it the most. Venezuela is number one in terms of, just the badness of the inflation there. And as Gabo said, so, we got thrown on a panel together, a year and a half or so ago. And I realized, like, okay, we could really make this real if we convince this guy to join the project. And here we are.
Wow. Gabo, can you maybe expand on what hyperinflation looks like at a more like visceral level in Venezuela, so that we all, because I think, day to day we don't really think about this, but maybe you have some examples that you can give the audience about that.
When we talk about the number, and we talk about 1,000%, 1,000,000%, and we only think about, wow, people is losing value of their currency, of their savings, of their work, but what are the consequences behind that? How does it feel? And when you have an inflation that high, the whole financial system breaks. Your paper money, your paper currency, it becomes worthless. That is actually cheaper many times than paper itself. And it became useless because of that. And not became useless the paper currency, but as well credit card limits or even debit card limits, they become useless. So even, for example, to buy a coffee, you need to do a wire transfer from one bank to the other. And when there are no options, people even start doing trades. And people go and buy toilet paper because they're making a line, whatever, waiting for whatever they may get, and they will get that item to trade it for something else. So those are like the most obscure elements that happen, and things like that start to happen, but also for an emotional level and a stress level for the whole society. Everybody is like the common topic of every conversation of every Venezuelan, to talk how much the dollar increased from one day to the other, because sometimes might be 20% or 30%, but you may think, all right, people talk about the economy here in the States too. Yes, people talk about the economy, but what happened in Venezuela is that if you don't change your bolivar from one day to the other, you may lose 20% of the value of what you hard work for. And therefore, like, the whole economy start collapsing, and salaries start collapsing. And for example, I graduated from law school over there in Venezuela. And when I went back at the end of 2015, I had colleagues that graduated in law school with me, and they were earning about $100 per month. It was their whole salary of how much they were earning. So people became desperate in these circumstances, and people they don't find solutions for what they are dealing there. They cannot easily trade, because you can say, well, you can go. What happens if you go to the bank or you go to the street and change your currency easily? And yes, there may be a few people, and there is a percentage of people that have access, to international bank accounts because they have connections, or they travel, or they have visas to come here and open a bank account. But the big majority of the population doesn't have that privilege. It is, and we forget many times, particularly when we don't think about, the importance on a stable currency in a country like this, but we forget that is a privilege that in many places of the world doesn't exist. It is limited, and when that access is limited, your capacity to develop as a human being is limited as well, and that is literally not fair, and especially not fair because there are the tools, there are the technology to actually guarantee this and to make it accessible to every human being. So those elements create that level of desperation that people decide to leave even walk in the country and walk thousands of miles to look for a better future, because they even take the decision to leave even their homes alone because they're desperate. And that is the circumstances that we are living over there, for example, in Venezuela. But that hasn't only happened in Venezuela so far. Like in Latin America, hyperinflation has been almost like the hot potato. So Peru has had a hyperinflation, Bolivia, Chile, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina. So it has been a common topic, and kind of like that element that we are always concerned across the region, and that has limited the whole development of the region. And is what I'm here for is to change that reality, and what I've been trying to do is to change that reality.
So I know you both believe that access to stable currency should be a basic human right. Can one of you perhaps talk about this petition that you recently launched and what that's about?
Yeah, like on that sense, is the denial of accepting.
Wait, can I take this one?
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, what? Okay, we are trying to eventually get the UN to recognize access to stable currency as a human right. Okay, what does that mean? Like, what is a human right? A human right is basically when, like, we collectively as humans decide that something is, like, really essential to basically every human to live, like, the way that they define it is like a dignified life, like a good life, okay? And also, it's something that we have the capacity to easily provide to everybody. So it's like, it's essential, and it's not that hard to provide to everybody, so we should just decide collectively that we're going to provide it to everybody, because then all of our lives will be better. So a recent thing that was added like a decade ago to the list of human rights by the UN is access to clean water. It's like, we all need it, we've got enough resources and technology to provide it to everyone, so we're deciding this is something that we collectively want to provide to everyone. And then, like, more recently, there's a debate about should access to the internet be considered a human right. So that's like where we are as a society in terms of what we're thinking about, like, well, maybe this should also be added to the list. And when we were thinking about, so that's like a little bit of background. Now you should go ahead and take it.
I mean, is that when that access is limited, that is, when you recognize that it's a privilege, and particularly the developed world may not see it that way because they have that privilege on that sense. And when you realize that the development of the people of your society, of your family, of your friends is basically limited to the lack of access of unstable currency, you say this is not fair. It is not fair, and it's unjust. Why somebody that studied, 5, 8, 10 years as for their development careers and so on, they cannot have access to have the control of their own financial destiny because their currency is just losing value. It is not fair, and that unfairness is what we say it cannot be. It has to be inherent to a human being to have that access, and it should be because there is the technology to make it happen and to guarantee it. So what we were trying to do on that sense, that is our belief that it should be. That is the reason that we are going, to the places of the world where this access is more limited. What we are doing is starting that debate. Because we don't think about it here. Like when we go and pay with Apple Pay or Android Pay or credit card or gift card of miles, we're not thinking about like what I'm going to do tomorrow to change my currency. Who do I need to contact over WhatsApp, or my friend of a friend may change my currency? You're not thinking about it. You're not thinking about it that even if you graduate as a lawyer, like we're compliance officer here, like Matt, like he graduated as a lawyer. Can you imagine actually earning $100 a month? because your currency just lost all the value, and there is no possibility to change. And when you are motivated by that, and when you see your friends, your family, your country suffering, you say we need to change this, and we need to build under the change, and it's particularly on the social issue of the human right. We need to start talking about it. We need to start recognizing it, that that reality can change. That new paradigm can actually be achieved, and build a better world in that sense.
What traction have you seen thus far with the petition, and how can the audience participate in that and help spread the word?
Well, so far, 13,000 people have signed the petition. The petition itself is to request to the UN to be recognized as a human right, but most importantly, I feel that is the people that have signed it is people saying, I care. Is people saying this is important? Yes, this is a human right. And just for example, out of the 13,000 people that have signed it, more than 9,000 of those signatures are Venezuelans. And that is the debate that it needs to start to happen, and that we are promoting, and it's part of our belief of why we do what we do.
And if you want to sign it, you can go to stablecurrency.org.
Nevin, I recently listened to you on a podcast, and you outlined some of the growth that Reserv has seen over the past year. Can you share some of that with the audience, and maybe some of those statistics that paint a better picture of what is actually happening here with the user behavior?
Yeah. So let me talk about what it is that what it is that we offer, and how it actually changes the game a bit for people in the circumstance we've been talking about. So we have an app. It's an Android app only right now, and basically all it is if you use Venmo or Cash App, it's just like that. It's just a simple, very limited, sort of micro bank account app. And the difference is that you can easily get your money in or out from Venezuelan bolivars or Argentine pesos or Colombian pesos and a few other different methods, some cryptocurrencies, etc. So that basic financial service of something that's just like Cash App, it doesn't readily exist under conditions that we've been talking about, like in Venezuela. And so what this does is it makes it so that when you get paid in Venezuelan bolivars, instead of having to as Gabo alluded to, go message a bunch of people on WhatsApp and try to find someone who you can buy dollars from, either physical cash US dollars, or you make a bank transfer and they make a bank transfer to your cousin's bank account or something, which is that's the common practice. So normally it's when your payday happens, you try to buy dollars somehow. In this case now, you can receive Venezuelan bolivars to your bank account, and then you can just convert them to US dollars in usually under a minute, from your couch, in the privacy of your own home. And so that's kind of a game changer. It means that it's really easy. You're no longer exposed to that volatility. You get paid, and then boom, your money is in a stable form no matter what you got it in, and you can hold it there for as long as you want, and then you can take it out a little bit at a time. So we see this behavior frequently where people get paid, they move their money into dollars, and then they move it back out into bolivars or pesos, whatever it may be, right before they're going to go make a transaction. And so that means you just no longer have to stress over the possibility of your money losing value, because you only move into that volatile currency to go make a transaction. So that's what our app does. And not surprisingly, given the context we've just shared, people it's started to gain in popularity. It's still early on, but I guess to summarize here, so it's been out for about a year, and in that year, people have done about 1.8 million transactions in the app, moving about $235 million worth of value, and so what's so cool about this is that it's the most exciting thing that I've seen in terms of people using cryptocurrency as actual money, and really being able to solve a really significant direct real world problem just in terms of basic money. So at this point, it's there's about 100,000 people who open up the Reserv app each week in order to do these currency exchanges, or to actually just spend directly in cryptocurrency, and that's something that we're starting to see now. So at the beginning, people would use it mainly just for savings. You know, they would move their money in and then convert it back out to spend. We're starting to see this actually be integrated more into the economy. So at this point, there's about 5,000 merchants that are just directly accepting payment in Reserv, and then people are starting to use it for payroll. So there's, you know, like all the different functions of the economy are starting to be integrated in a very hacky way, because it's just this simple app. Like we don't even have like a payroll interface. You know, you can't even access it like on your computer, and it's been really interesting to see, you know, like businesses in Venezuela use it to move like millions of dollars back and forth in and out of their American bank accounts, even though it's this sort of chintzy little app, just because it's a channel that's open to them. Like you actually can do those kinds of transactions. So we're seeing that like by putting that openness out there and allowing people to freely move their money back and forth, people are doing that. So that's kind of some of the traction we've been seeing.
It's pretty remarkable, honestly. And have you seen any traction? I know you've had a lot of traction in Venezuela in particular, but in other markets as well?
Yeah, we've seen it start to pick up in Colombia and Argentina. Not quite as much. And there's like sort of complicated reasons why. And, you know, like with this project, it took us quite a long time to figure out all the logistical details to make that work. And we focused on Venezuela first. So it's like, you know, well, how do you actually get your money in? It's like, well, you have to like make a bank transfer to some liquidity provider in our network. So we have, dozens of different people and businesses who are willing to accept those transfers and basically sell you this dollar cryptocurrency. But like all of the technical and like legal logistics for making that happen took a long time to get together. And so we're kind of earlier on in that process in Argentina and Colombia. But we've started to see some uptake basically for the same reasons. And then like in Colombia, right now there aren't major currency issues. So it's mostly people moving money in and out of Venezuela because there's like millions of Venezuelans who fled to Colombia because of the crisis that Gabo mentioned. Yeah.
And also some businesses, like I know you have a grassroots effort on the ground that are actually accepting Reserv as payment rails, right? And you're exponentially increasing that functionality?
And something that's really cool is other apps have started to integrate it as a form of payment. So like you can like call a rideshare or call like a food delivery in Caracas, Venezuela, and pay with Reserv, with cryptocurrency. And then one of those companies, like I said, is now paying their employees with it. So we're starting to see sort of it show up in like different parts of the economy.
I think that it is important also to portray the reaction of the people, because this is a game changer for many Venezuelans out there in the country. Like people just say, "Wow, I'm beating communism. Wow, I'm beating inflation." People is writing songs and dedicating songs to finally I'm beating inflation with this, because people were in despair. People didn't saw a light basically at the end of the tunnel. People were leaving their homes. And now, out of a sudden, with an app, they're like the biggest problem that they have. In just 30 seconds, it's gone. So, and the element of, protecting the value of your work, of payment, of everything, start to change, and that brings hope. Hope to rebuild, hope for a better future, and those reactions that we get every day as a team, on how people is not only using it, but how they are escaping basically on that reality is really motivating for the whole team, and particularly for me as my personal journey is really motivating.
I want to open it up to audience questions at the end, but before we do so, I'd love to get kind of any calls to action or anything that you want to leave the audience with tonight before we open it up.
So in terms of calls to action, and actually this is great for this audience in particular. We want to hire a filmmaker to help us tell this story in film, like very vividly, about these individual people, about the effects on the economy, and just kind of what hyperinflation is like and what cryptocurrency is doing for that. Not even just Reserv, but like also other projects that exist. We've done our best to convey that, in spoken word in the past half an hour, but it's really I really believe it would be so much more vivid if we could tell that story with film. So So yeah, I'm very interested in meeting people here tonight or people that you guys know who would be interested in this, who would find this compelling, and who would consider helping us tell the story in film. We're not looking to hire like a consultant to make just like a one-off documentary or something. We want to hire someone to be full-time on the project and have their constant duty be continually documenting the project, the progress that's happening with cryptocurrency in these countries. So that's my call to action. Please come talk to me afterwards if you know anyone who you think would be a good fit for that.
Gabo, anything you want to share?
Like my call to action is overall for entrepreneurs and innovators. We need more people. We need to cheer. We need to help more people to come and focus on the biggest challenges and problems that we have on the society. I think that that is something that I'm always concerned about, particularly on my country where many people is hopeless about a different future. We need more people to think that, you know, that future that we think is completely lost, to think that is different, that we can build a different future. This technology, the black canvas of what we have nowadays in crypto is open for imagination, is open to challenge the status quo of what is actually happening nowadays. And there may be, you know, problems that our society is having, but there may be elements that can change that whole industry and can create new sources of income for millions of people, very much like the work that Ayman is doing. And I want also always to cheer more innovators and cheer more people to try it and build it. And overall on this audience, and in this audience that can share other people, can create content to motivate other people to try it, because there is something also very costly about being an innovator. That is failure. I failed, and that is a weight that I carried on my shoulders. Everybody, everywhere that I go, people ask me about the Petro. The Petro is a scam, and the people always ask me and point at me about that failure, and that is something that I carry, and that is very challenging to carry on. But we need to cheer more people and bring more people into the space and to innovate and create a new and better world.
Let's give a hand for these two and all the work that they're doing. Does anyone from the audience have any questions?
So if there's a 70% loss in value of this income, who takes the loss once it's turned into stable currency? So if I were to sell my dollars to this person, would I be taking the loss for that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Yeah, so it's like if you have this currency that's losing value and then you buy dollars, like why would somebody even want to sell you the dollars is like one way of asking a question. It becomes a game of hot potato, as you might imagine, right? So it's like, okay, let me put it this way. So let's say that, you know, this volatile currency, you know, is worth like this much right now, and your dollars are worth like this much right now. And let's say you have the dollars and I have the volatile currency, okay? You're like, I'm cool with dollars. You keep the volatile currency by default, right? But, well, if I offer you enough, if I'm like, all right, well, you know, I'll give you twice as much volatile currency for the same amount of dollars. All of a sudden you're like, well, at current exchange rates, that actually seems pretty appealing. I would be willing to take that if you pay me enough. Right? So there always ends up being some market price where people are willing to make that trade back and forth. And so what ends up happening in economies like this is you get market makers. You get people who decide, okay, I'm going to make it my job to buy and sell these currencies back and forth and make money. And so that's actually what powers the Reserv app. So these liquidity providers, these market makers are sitting there, they're willing to buy dollars from the users or sell dollars back to the users all day long at slightly different prices. And the fact that those prices are slightly different means that they're profiting every time they do a round trip transaction. So they try to finish the day having mostly dollars and having very little volatile currency, but they're willing to trade back and forth all day to provide liquidity to the system. And as long as they profit enough, then even if they hold the volatile currency overnight and lose some money, they come out ahead overall. So basically, Yeah, those market makers, plus the fact that people do want to get money into that volatile currency because it's actually the thing that's most transacted. It's obviously totally ubiquitous in Argentina, the Argentine peso, but even in Venezuela, the Venezuelan bolivar, it's like the main thing that you can digitally transact in the country. So even if you don't want to hold it, you do want it in order to go make transactions. And so that transactional demand means that there continues to be a liquid market back and forth between the currencies, even though nobody really wants to hold it for a long period of time.
Just a quick question. Doesn't that increase the inflation?
Well, it's a good question. So it's like, if you anytime you make some other asset that's more attractive available for a pool of asset holders, and if they're going to trade into that other asset, then yes, it will devalue the asset that they were holding before. However, if you look at Venezuela as an example case, most of the wealth in Venezuela moved into dollars a long ass time ago, because all of the wealthy people were able to coordinate getting access to US dollar bank accounts, basically, and foreign stock brokerage accounts and so on and so forth. So the majority of the people who end up holding the bolivars and actually losing the value are, it's already been devalued like a million zillion %. And it's kind of just this weird transactional thing that's always already tanking. And it's mostly, when it's mostly held by people who don't have very much wealth, who don't have a way to get out of it. So what we're doing, I think arguably on the margin, is causing like a little bit more devaluation, but the bulk of it has basically already occurred.
Hi. The earlier panel really dove into financial empowerment around art and NFTs and lots of new opportunities that have just really taken over the news this year. Here we're talking about Venezuela and Argentina. I'm curious, how does Reserv protocol connect the dots between those two worlds? What do you see potentially unfolding in the next 12 months? Thank you.
Well, so, I mean, one concrete connection actually between Reserv and Axie Infinity is that there's so many people playing this game that Manu referred to, called Axie Infinity, where you fight these little monsters and you get this cryptocurrency, and then you can go sell the cryptocurrency. So we actually added that currency to our app. So you can convert your Axie tokens, SLP, into dollars directly in the app. And that's something that has been popular as a result. So that's one, I guess that's the main concrete connection. And we anticipate it might be the case that this play to earn phenomenon continues to blossom. Maybe there'll be other games like that. And so for our users, we will probably facilitate the same sort of convertibility. As far as like other more profound ways that we might relate to that space, the answer from my perspective is I don't know.
And on that, I want to add to like what is interesting about this play to earn and metaverse or so on is that it knows no borders. And sorry for my pronunciation, but it knows no borders. And what we claim is that access to a stable currency should know no borders. Like everybody should have access to that. So on the metaverse, basically, it doesn't matter wherever you are. It's about the value that you're adding. It's about your outcome, what you're getting. And on this context, what our belief is that it doesn't matter in what part of the world you live. It doesn't matter where you were born or where you are living. What matters is particularly that a border one delimit or one define the destiny of your future, and having access to a stable currency is a fundamental piece for that to happen. And that is on that sense, that is how I feel it connects with a metaverse on that scenario.
Sounds like we have one more over here.
Maybe one more. I'll close it then the way I opened it, which is the emergence of a new form of universal basic income, which I think is going to be a lot more powerful than the way people are perceiving it today, and a lot more effective, which is universal basic creativity. It's one thing to have play to earn. It's another thing to think about create to earn. where the game is of your own choosing, of your own making, of your own design, the ability to create poetry, spoken word, tell your story, music, or even do a task, but to be able to bring into this emerging metaverse your capability and your personality and your particular story, and get paid in a way that actually would be stable and that you can use for the benefit of your own life and your family, and to create an annuity on your own output. And I think that what you're doing, coupled with what the economy is bringing from the previous panel, the NFT economy and the ability to have every man, woman, and child on the planet to have a repository for earnings and an ability to bring their story to life is profound and will change everything. So I just want to thank you for bringing this to the world. I think what you're doing is monumentally important, and I'm proud to know you and proud to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Just a quick question. Why only Android? And are you looking at Apple? And it really, because I question whether there
it's a
isn't
wonderful
space
question.
for...
No, it's a totally legitimate question. I didn't mean, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because we've been sort of having a debate for the past year about, is it time? The reason is very practical. It's just that when you deploy on two platforms, your programmers have to spend time maintaining and updating the app on both platforms. And we've been so obsessed and busy figuring out all the little details of just making the model work that we've been putting it off. But we're pretty close. It's actually the thing that our programmers are working on now to start supporting both platforms. And that'll really help, because there's a bunch of people who've just not been able to access, and that's not cool.
Is Reserv something that would benefit from people who aren't in environments? And by the way, Venezuelan woman here, I remember Venezuela before all of this. It's heartbreaking to hear this story. My heart hurts. It's really important to stress what an incredible place, what an incredible country it was before this happened. It's really important to stress this. Sorry. Sorry. My point is it something that outside of South America that can your platform benefit from us being a part of the platform, is my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a short-term answer and a long-term answer. In the short term, we do see transactions because of the fact that people in the countries we serve, they do a lot of business with people in other places, like the U.S. So actually, we do see a lot of volume going in and out of U.S. businesses because of those dealings. And I think that's going to be the initial beachhead. But I guess there's a midterm answer, which is that cryptocurrency and DeFi have popped out this weird thing, which is you can lend your U.S. dollars and get a higher yield than you normally get in the traditional banking system. And that's basically because crypto speculators want to borrow your money to go use it to speculate, and they're willing to pay you a lot to do that. The next version of the Reserv stablecoin will incorporate that yield. So it will basically have a version of that's like Cash App, like I said, but you'll be able to have a balance, and you'll get a lot more yield on that balance than you would ordinarily in a normal American bank account or in Cash App. So that could be a popular product even here in the U.S. And then the even longer term answer goes back to kind of how I opened, thinking about, well, is the U.S. dollar going to last forever or not? And the way that our underlying technology that we haven't talked about tonight, nor should we, the way the underlying technology works, it's planning ahead for that. It's planning ahead for a scenario where we can actually birth a currency that is totally distinct from the US dollar, that's backed by basically a diverse basket of assets, so that in the world where the US dollar starts to fall apart, which, who knows when that will happen. I don't think it's an if, but I think it's a when, but who knows when. In that world, maybe we could transition to a crypto reserve currency that, like that original idea, would make it so that, we're not dependent on government monetary policy to sort of keep the game going from empire to empire. So in that world, then yes, it could become really relevant, but that's quite far away.
Well, thanks, everyone. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nevin. Thank you, Gabo. Thank you, Kelley, for this. We really appreciate it.